Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm sorry. Now let's give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Clancy. Woo!
My name is Clancy Imislund. I'm an alcoholic. One thing about coming to Malibu to speak, it keeps you humble. 3 weeks ago, I was speaking in several thousand people on the East Coast, and I thought I must be I'm some kind of guy. And I come to Malibu, and who's our speaker? Oh, that asshole. But I'm glad to be here. I took my first birthday cake in this meeting. We were talking before the coffee break. I had my first meeting, and I came out here, and my sponsor forgot it was my birthday. I'd called him up and said it was my first birthday, and it didn't seem enough to him, and he didn't show up to give me a cake, and they finally gave me a cupcake with a candle on it. But I felt very good because I'd been in and out of AA for 10 years by that time, and I was most struck. At that time, this meeting was held in the old courthouse up on the main street. That was 1959. That's a long time ago. I was thinking tonight when Vinny was talking, gave an excellent talk, that I got sober in 1958. And in the 1960s, I was one of the straight people he hated. And he was one of the hippies I hated. So in 1968, when he came to California, I bought a home in Venice, as far away from Venice Beach as I could and those unwashed fools. And just paid the last payment on it a few months ago, 30-year mortgage. But I think one of the great reasons I had such a hostility towards the dropouts, the professional protesters, the dropouts, the people hanging around the beach, is because part of me wanted to be there. I didn't want to go to work, and I didn't want to get up and clean up, and so I had to develop, some sort of innate hostility against that old school of thought, or rather I'd have given into it, and I would have been down the toilet, because I had a lot of difficulty in my career with not sustaining any form of success. I grew up in a little town in Wisconsin. When I was a young man. I was restless and irritable at 15, and I ran away from home and got to San Francisco early in the Second World War, and I lied my age and got Siemens papers, and in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I had my first drink of whiskey, and it didn't turn me into a raging alcoholic, but I discovered it made me feel like a man. And that was the most important thing I could think of. And I didn't think anything about it, when you're in your teens or when you learn things. Everybody in that ship smoked. I never smoked. I was raised in a very religious home. But I smoked and puked till I finally smoked and didn't puke. And I smoked 2.5 or 3 packs a day every day for the next 45 years. Except when I was under electric shock and couldn't have matches. But that was only a couple months. I learned to lust effectively on that ship. People told me techniques. They all talked about sex they'd been having in San Francisco, and I'd had sex in Wisconsin, but I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. And these people were doing it with others, if you could imagine such a thing as that. And later on, I got another ship, and I wasn't quite so dumb, and then I went in the Navy finally when I was 17, and at the end of the war, I was up in San Francisco in the hospital being sewed together, and they passed around some tests. I've always been very good on tests because I read a lot. And did very well. They gave me a high school diploma, which was great. I never thought anything about it at the time, but I thought about it later. When I went back to Wisconsin after the war, if I hadn't done well in that test, they'd want me to start my junior year of high school again. I never would have done that. I was much too slick by this time. But instead, I went to college after the war, the first class of veterans, and kind of a wild time, and drinkers and hollers, and this bane of little 17-year-old girls just fresh out of high school, I'll tell you. And I got married in college. That's what people did. And out in the world, I became a sports writer. I won a couple trophies for the university, and I went out, became a sports writer, newspaper sports writer. And then my wife, I had married this Catholic girl, which they warned me as a Lutheran I shouldn't do because they had different customs than Lutherans. And I didn't know what they meant, but I found out after I was married a short time. My wife began having children with monotonous regularity. I became a national distributor of small Catholics. Just boom. And so I had to get better jobs, so I had to get into some advertising, and I got in public relations. I worked in various jobs, and I always drank a lot. And I always enjoyed drinking. I enjoyed all the things I learned about as a boy, and I never thought about it at the time. I could look back now and see why I drank, because I didn't drink because I was a drinker, really. I drank because I seemed to have funny feelings a lot of the time. I seemed to feel, somehow or other, I never feel much like I fit in, feeling kind of inadequate. And no matter how many pats on the back there were, 5 minutes later you feel, well, maybe not enough. And feeling a little resentful the way I get treated, and feeling I don't have my rights, and all endless things. But I discovered on that ship and thereafter, a couple drinks makes it better. That's why I drink. Sometimes I drink too much. And then there are good, well-intentioned people who think I have a drinking problem. But I thought I did. I went to my first AA meeting. I was sent to my first AA meeting in 1949. That's a long time ago. A lot of you folks weren't even born. We love you. And, I didn't. Seemed to me a bunch of old, burned-out fools with gray hair. I'm sure just the way I look to you tonight, except they weren't that old, but they were more burned out. And I don't know what the hell they said. I'm sure they said things like newcomers think I'm going to say it. I stayed drunk around the clock for 25 years. One day I walked through that door. They told me to put the plug in the jug, and I did. And I just never felt so goddamn happy. Why don't you tell your face? But I always seemed to have a little trouble drinking, so from time to time in the next few years I'd go to AA in different city I worked in. After a while I realized AA has no effect on cases like mine because it's designed for drinking problems, but I'd go take the heat off. I knew that my problems were considerably more complex and deeper, so I spent several thousands of dollars and spent a lot of time in psychoanalysis to get to the root of why I had these feelings. And I'll tell you, some people tell you shouldn't go to psychoanalysis. I loved it. I found ways that I'd been hurt I never dreamed of. I tell you, I've been hurt a lot. I'd want to talk about it, but I've been hurt a lot. For example, I found out that I had been repressed by the Norwegian Lutheran Church. My own church had repressed me. I didn't know that. If I knew then what I know now, I would have formed adult children of Norwegian Lutherans. We could have hired a couple codependents and sat around and been pissed off every week. I discovered I'd been hurt by the depression. Didn't know there'd been a depression. I really found, I used to come out there just thinking, God, it's so good to know these things. And I found out, as far as I could tell, exactly why these emotions were within me. It took me a long time to realize I still had all the feelings, I just knew why, They still were as painful as ever, but I could talk about them, The only use maybe for that kind of information is maybe late at night in a bar when you're in a beef with some guy and what the hell's wrong with you? Then you can tell him. When I was repressed as a child by the oh, shut up. I worked around, I was up and down and up and down, and but drinking has the tendency to redress these feelings. drinking has a tendency to make me feel the way men look much of the time. And I went up and down. I was a pretty good writer. I'd lose a job for emotional explosions, or I'd get fired, or I'd quit, or go to a different city. And I went up to several cities. Every time I would go to a new city, my wife would get pregnant, have another baby. And I went down, I was up and down. And one time I went down and didn't come back up. And I couldn't believe it, because I always come back up. I'm slick enough to come back up. And it was in Dallas, and I went down. And within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, I lost my job at Tracy Locke, which was a big advertising agency. And my wife took the children and left, went who knows where. They repossessed my car. I must have been going downhill for a long time, but it always seemed I was kind of holding my own. And I just wound up with a bunch of clothes on the floor of an empty house. And I found a way to get a hold of a car briefly, because they wanted to get a car to Los Angeles. So I got that car, and I took it to El Paso and got drunk with some friends, and went on to Phoenix and got drunk again and lost the car, and got in jail overnight. And in the middle of the night, I got sick and threw up in a guy's bunk, and he wasn't there, thank heaven, but he came back and found me laying on the floor by his bunk, and he, damn drunken bastard, kicked my front teeth out. That was one of the few mornings I was really glad I'd been in psychoanalysis, because I was almost instantly able to identify his problem. I remember thinking, this son of a bitch is overreacting. Yeah, that gives you a little insight. And a couple of days later, I was over in Los Angeles somehow. I hustled some money, got to Los Angeles where I didn't know anybody. And a guy at KFWB named Ted Quillen was a big star at that time, and I'd given him his start in another city, and I got some money from him. I told him I'd been in a terrible car accident, and he gave me some money, and I spent that, and came back a couple weeks later, and I said, I haven't got my money. I said, no, I called about you. You've turned into a drunken bum. Stay away from KFWB. And he threw $5 down on some wet ground, and I picked it up. I still remember that humiliation. And about a week after that, I found myself in a position that a man of my background and education and intelligence cannot be in. 2 big guys were throwing me out of the midnight mission on Skid Row in Los Angeles. And stay out of here, you damn bum. I tried to explain to him, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I helped write, the old L.C. Delmore ads for the Board and Company, were running that very week in Life and Time and Saturday Evening Post. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times for one of their achievements? But it's hard to explain these things in midair. And I stood outside of that stinking old mission that morning. It was a cold autumn morning, rain falling, light rain. And I remember thinking, this can't be happening to me. This must be a dream. Any minute my wife's going to shake me and say, come on, Clancy, you kicked off all your covers. Get up and go to work. But it wasn't a dream. And I had a terrible feeling. I couldn't identify it then, but I've heard enough about it from other people. They told me as their sponsor, so I know what the feeling was for me. But you get in a situation where there is no friendly direction. There is no direction where if you follow it to the end, there's going to be someone glad to see you. And I just felt so terrible. If some guy had come up to me that morning and said, you know, pal, you're dying. You're down to 125 pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. Once upon a time, they called you a boy genius. Now you can't even get a job washing dishes. You've lost your clothing. Apparently, it's all left in that car in Phoenix that you'll never see again. Even if you had clothing, you can't get a job. Your mouth is just a bloody maw. You're an only child, and your mother is no longer able to accept phone calls from you because your stepfather is so tired of watching you manipulate her to get a few more bucks and then tell her a story and then break her heart again. Now, you've been going to AA for a lot of years, 10 years off and on around the country. Why don't you just go back to AA one more time and admit you're an alcoholic before you die? And if I were in the mood to be honest, which I may or may not have been, but if I were in the mood to be honest, I'd have to tell him, pal, it isn't the way it looks. I'm not an alcoholic. Don't misunderstand me. I know there's something wrong with me. I've known there's something wrong with me since I was a little boy, and I've been disguising it the best I know how. And I wish it were alcohol. God would make my life so much simpler, but my problem is not alcohol. And he said, well, prove you're not an alcoholic. If you had said that, I'd have had to say, I wouldn't know what to say. because I wouldn't have had the ability to stand back and delineate the differences. So I probably would have had to take refuge, but people like me take refuge behind, because we're frightened and we're insecure, so we take refuge behind bluster. And we say things like, "Oh, get out of my face, screw you, leave me alone," because I wouldn't have known the right answer. I know the right answer tonight, I've known it for a long time. And it's nothing mystic. A lot of people want to make AA come kind of a mystic thing, and it really is a very pragmatic thing, but it takes a while here to discover that. And a lot of people die before they find out. But the reason was quite simple. I'd been to a lot of meetings over the years in a lot of cities. I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't learn much, but at least I learned what an alcoholic was. And I wasn't that. Just that simple. So that kind of begs the question, what's an alcoholic? Well, everybody here knows what an alcoholic is. People driving up and down on Gray Fox out here know what an alcoholic is that have no idea there's an AA meeting here. People up and down the highway. Sat in a restaurant tonight with a friend of mine having dinner. And a lot of people, everyone in that room would know what an alcoholic was. And alcoholics, there seem to be, people are in every generation who, would you hand me that water? I got a little sore throat. Some of the newer groups have glasses. I guess they figured they gave me such a short time to talk, my throat wouldn't get sore. I'm just kidding. But in every generation there seem to be people who drink too much and they don't seem to care, they can't handle it. Thank you, my dear, how wonderful of you. And they, and eventually their lives get all screwed up, their emotions get painful, they get driven to someplace like AA, and the AAs clean them up, or they straighten them out, they get them sober, and their lives get better. If you go to this meeting every Saturday night, you'll hear that story every night. You've heard it twice tonight, once already. Different stories, different backgrounds, different specifics. New Jersey, Wisconsin, New York, Montana. But it's always the same. I used to drink and my life was all painful. I came today and cleaned up my act, and now I'm feeling better. And in many ways, I could pass as an alcoholic, because I drank like an alcoholic, it seemed like. And I lost a lot, and I could talk drinking stories with anybody. Jail stories, hospital stories. But the one thing I could never overcome, one little tattered shred of integrity that blocked me, is that unlike alcoholics, it is when I get sober and clean up my act, that's when my life gets painful. And that's when my feelings get out of whack. And there's a certain elation of stopping drinking. But always, in retrospect, I couldn't just define it at the time, but for the sake of description, I could say that after I'm sober a little while, it's almost as though someone puts an invisible spring inside my gut. And every day they just press it a little bit more. I get a little more tense, a little more irritable. And I know that a couple of drinks will make it better. And when you're young, it's okay. Because you start to feel that way, you say, screw it. Ha, ha, ha. But as you get older and you start having some problems, it gets bad, because now you have to start promising people you won't drink. You might have to promise your child or your wife or your boss or somebody or a judge or something. No, I've learned my lesson. And then you get sober, and you know that the answer is right there. And I can't drink it, and I resent these dirty bastards for treating me like a child. And they don't understand anyway. No, just really, and self-pity and anger and rage. And eventually the time comes, I got to drink. It wasn't until after I was sober well, and I read in that book a phrase that describes that exactly. There seems to be a time at which there is no adequate defense against the first drink. The defense against the necessity to escape from where I am in my head. And then eventually I drink too much again, and then well-meaning people say, oh, you got a drinking problem, boy. You ought to go to AA. And you have to say, gee, thanks for the advice. But inside your voice just wants to shriek, but you don't understand. My case is different. I'm not like that. There's something wrong with me, but it isn't that. But nobody came over and talked to me that morning. I just stood in the rain. And I remember that a week before that, somebody dropped me off in an AA club. And I didn't know where the hell it was, but I knew I could get off the streets there. pretend to be a newcomer and you can always get off the streets. And so all I heard, I remember, had exotic names of the streets, Wilshire and Fairfax, wherever the hell that was. So I asked somebody, where's Wilshire and Fairfax? Well, Wilshire doesn't come all the way down here. You have to go up to Hill Street, over to Hill Street, up the hill, and then over to Wilshire, and then turn right. And I did that, and I walked that. And it was raining, and I was sick and desperate. I felt so terrible. I counted later in my car, some years later, it was 72 long blocks. That's a long way to walk when you're sick and desperate and don't know where the hell you are in this strange town. A woman in New York asked me one time, how could you possibly walk that far when you were so sick and desperate? And of course the answer is quite simple. That's the only time you can. You could do it no other time. But when you're sick and desperate enough, you'll do what you got to do. And I got to that club, and I hated to go in there. A bunch of AA fanatics in there, usual crap and steps on the wall. Keep coming back. Turn your life over to God. I used to just yearn. Why can't I be stupid like these people? Jesus, why have I been cursed with intelligence? And I hung around that damn club, and it was just terrible, and it was so full of fanatics. I guess a few years ago, I was talking in Toronto. I'll tell you how to become an authority in AA. You have to come from a long ways away. Like we have our Southern California convention, we have speakers from East Coast, and they are our authorities. And when they have a convention on the East Coast, they bring speakers from California because we're authorities then, the further you come. A few years ago, I was an authority in Toronto. And they're having an afternoon meeting where they had a question and answer meeting that I've discovered I just love question and answer meetings because I've developed a facility to weave a tapestry of BS while I think of the answer. And I'd given several wonderful answers, and some woman in the back said, Clancy, if you don't mind, I wouldn't like one of your long answers. Just a sentence or two. What was different this time? You always talk about how long you slip and how long you're sober. What made a difference? And in a sentence or two, I finally told her, it's not impossible to discuss that in a sentence or two. I think that's a kind of an unfair restriction you made on me. And I wanted to go back and punch her right in her ugly face. I'd have done it with love, but But I was taking a shower that night before I was supposed to speak at this dinner, and the answer came. And it's such a tawdry little cheap answer. I like answers with a little panache, a little body, a little zip. I mean, I like to have the new people. We have several new people here today. I wish they'd leave the room saying, did you hear what Clancy said? Wet birds don't fly at night. Did you hear what Clancy said? Never mind if the horse is blind. Keep loading the wagon. These answers mean nothing, but they give the newcomer hope. The answer I thought of was so tawdry and cheap. This was the first time I ever felt so bad that I let these dumb AA members tell me what to do. I had never sunk to that level before. I didn't intend to sink to it then, but that's what happens. If you're kind of new, if you've got not much going for you, you hang with a bunch of activists and winners and fanatics. You don't even have to want to do. They just pull you along. Come on, everybody, we're going to a meeting. Going to a meeting. Come on, we're going to help Fred move his furniture. Help Fred move his furniture. Shit. On and on. And I lived in the back seat of an abandoned car in the AA Club parking lot. An old 49 Merc, but it was in some tall grass, so it wasn't conspicuous. I lived in that damn club, and I eventually got the next step, which is a sponsor. If you're new tonight, you'll hear that sooner or later. Somebody say, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. You want to be careful. You'll find that sponsors have a tendency to stick their nose in your business. And I used to see a guy come in the club, but he lived out on Muskingum in Pacific Palisades. His name was Bob Bailey, and he was an actor in the movies. And he just a character actor, but he always played loving roles, kindly loving roles, giving people money and helping them. And I thought, that's my new sponsor. I'll get some teeth and some clothes. I'll be back in New York. I'll come back someday and buy this goddamn club and fire him. I said, Bob, would you be my sponsor? He said, sure, Ken, I want you to do what I say. Oh, sure, Bob. I want sobriety on an all-time basis. They like to hear that. I look back now and I think he should have won the Academy Award for every loving role he ever played in any movie, because they were foreign to his nature, I'll tell you. He turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig. Jesus Christ. I've often looked back and wondered why I would take that crap, because I never took any crap from anybody. I'd get in fights in bars, like Vinny. If somebody implied I wasn't, maybe didn't look very tough, okay, you try me. Come on. I'd get knocked my butt a lot, but they knew I was tough. I quit jobs when people implied I might not have it all together. I used to look back and think, why would that be? After I listened to a couple inventories, I discovered why I think. It's because all my life I always knew I was a weakling. And I hate that. I hate being a weakling. There's nothing I can do. I'm weak inside. So I always had to be strong on the outside. And it's an ironic thing that if you stay here long enough and you do enough of these dumb actions, you become strong. Then you can afford to be weak. But you can't afford to be weak when you're weak. You have to be strong then. But why did I take that crap off him? You know who I liked? I liked the people who liked me. I had no respect for them. I thought they were stupid. But they liked me. I hated people who could see through me because they knew I was a phony, and I hated that. And he could see through me, and I hated him, but he also liked me. I did things to get that old boob's approval that I wouldn't have done from Jesus. I mean, you did a good job, kid. And little by little, I stayed sober, and I got little jobs and crappy things, and I had a very, very slow recovery. By the time I was a year sober, I'd been fired from several jobs. I was working again, had a little place to live, one-room apartment. And nobody, I had no clothes, had nothing. And I was 2 years sober. I finally got a little job as a writer in a medical corporation because I advised I could be a writer again, and I still didn't have any front teeth. I said to my sponsor, I said, Bob, I said something, but sending money to my kids, but I've stashed some money for some front teeth. I'm going to that corporation, I'm going to knock them dead. I said, you got money stashed away? Send them to your kids. I said, Jesus, Bob. They all got front teeth. He said, they got a crappy father. Send them the money. So I sent them the money, and I went to work carrying my lip like this. A lot of people didn't know I didn't have front teeth. They thought I'd been burned in a fire. But I went to work every day, and I learned some of the very same spiritual lessons that Vinny talked about tonight from my sponsor and from going to work every day. Do you want to hear some great spiritual lessons? Vinny talked about some of them already. Do what you said you would do. Be where you said you would be, when you said you would be there, or let them know you're not coming. Don't take out your hostility on people who can't answer back. Children, waiters and waitresses, employees. On days when you know you're having a bad day, watch that damn mouth, because you can cut people to ribbons and ruin relationships and never know. Just, we all know how that goes. And I didn't do very well at that job. I didn't learn those lessons, but I learned it well enough to finally get some front teeth and finally get to be director of advertising for that corporation. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were called in. We did something for you, Vinny. We created Boss Radio at KHJ. And we all wore shiny suits and said things like, what's coming on down, baby? It became number one, and it almost made me puke. When I was 10 years sober, I was downtown doing public relations for oil companies. 15 years sober, I was a marketing director at Beverly Hills. I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children. Heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas. Leaped out of their post office box, rushed to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. Somebody got me a metronome then, I got the rhythm system, that was the end of that. Sure beats coitus interruptus, or whatever they call it. And now they're all grown up. 3 of my kids got 10-year birthday cakes this year in AA, and the others aren't alcoholic. I live in a house out by the ocean. I've had the same job for 26 years now. And is there somebody here in their first week of sobriety? You're in your first week of sobriety. I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you feel better. I've got it all together, and you haven't. But I know you're happy for me. That's what counts. No, I'm really not that cruel. I want to know where you were. I want to tell you something. I want to give you a 5-minute talk. I've given these people 20 minutes of entertainment, 25 minutes. Let me give you a 5-minute talk. Because I think this is what saved my life. The most important thing I've said tonight, I said, my name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. And you may wonder later, when did he become an alcoholic? Was he an alcoholic when he drank? Was he an alcoholic when he got sober? When did he become an alcoholic? I knew I couldn't be an alcoholic because my problem really isn't alcohol. Never was. It was when I got drunk, and I could pretend it was and tell judges, but in my heart, I knew there was something different inside of me somehow. And imagine my surprise that these boobs kept me so busy for a while, going to these dumb meetings and doing these dumb things, long enough to discover something that somebody pointed out to me one day. The book Alcoholics Anonymous specifically states that my problem is not alcohol. In fact, if my problem is alcohol, I'm not an alcoholic. Now, doesn't that sound a little spooky? But you may think, sure, the problem is alcohol. I can disprove that in 5 seconds. If alcohol is the problem, detoxes turn out recovered people, and they don't. Treatment centers turn out recovered people. Hospitals turn out recovered people. So what is the problem if it isn't alcohol? Is it some psychobabble we haven't heard about yet? No, it's something that everyone in this room knows about, but may not know you have it. It is something called alcoholism. Same thing, isn't it? Alcohol, alcoholism? Not the same thing. Not the same thing. I'll guarantee you, if you be of our type, the day will come when your sanity and existence will depend upon remembering the difference. So what's the difference? Well, I could talk about that for 2 hours. But let's put it in one sentence. An alcohol problem is overcome by stopping drinking and cleaning up your act and shaping up. However, in this strange thing called alcoholism, which unfortunately for you and me looks almost exactly the same to the naked eye, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding, eventually fatal thing called alcoholism. You will discover sooner or later, if you haven't discovered it yet, that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. And then one other thing must be present. You must be one of the 6 or 7 or 8% of people, and nobody knows why to this day, who get an unnatural reaction to alcohol. One time they called it, for want of a better word, an allergy of the body. But call it an unnatural reaction. What's this unnatural reaction? What does it make you do? Stay drunk all the time? Nah. Make you act crazy? Some people do, some people don't. In my work today, I see alcoholics die sometimes who have never been crazy once, and they're dead. So what is this unnatural reaction? It's something I never would have guessed in 10,000 years. It must have the power not to do anything to you at all. It must have the power to do something tremendously well for you. It must almost instantly alter your perception of reality. And I never guessed it didn't do that for other people. All I knew is that it changes things. It changes my relationship. It changes my feelings. That a few drinks, I'll tell you, 3 martinis will make you feel better than 2 years of psychoanalysis. I'll guarantee you that's And that's why people that can understand why you drink, 'cause to them it makes them dizzy and eventually hot, and they don't want to drink anymore. And I can't understand why they don't, because for Christ's sake, look, when you got troubles, drink, do something about it. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. Eventually you come to depend on it to resolve your problems. And then you're in deep trouble because you don't take care of your problems much anymore anyway. And one day drinking gets to be a problem. Then you got to stop drinking. Then you realize it really wasn't the drinking at all. It's all this crap. So you got to drink. But you can't keep drinking, so you got to stop. But you can't stop, so you got to start. That's called alcoholism. And today in America, where there's more sobriety than any place in the history of the world, it's estimated that about 95% of alcoholics still die drunk. As a direct result of drinking. I think it's safe to say a number of people in this room will die drunk. Maybe me, maybe you. Not because AA doesn't work, but because my head will tell me something different. I remember my sponsor told me that when I was about 2 years sober. I thought, gee, it's some more of a stinking recruiting talk. But a couple of years later, when he got angry at the Pacific Palisades group that he had founded and changed the format without notifying him, he stopped going to the meetings. And he got drunk and died drunk. And he convinced me what he said was true. But I'm not trying to threaten you. I'm just trying to tell you that is why people like me, and I presume like many of us, come here and we get sober and learn all the words and know all the people. And pretty soon it starts to feel bad. You know that AA isn't working. And that's just exactly wrong. That's a normal procedure. Being sober, as has been said here tonight before, being sober is not the goal of AA. Being sober is the entrance to AA. You can come here drinking again and again, but if you want to be a member of AA, you got to be sober. That's why we suggest, and many groups tell you, that if you're taking other things too, that you're not really sober, because the point is not to get off alcohol, it is to live in reality. And you come to see AA, and you're sober, and you meet new people and go to meetings, it's kind of fun. But the natural state of sober alcoholics is eventually is growing anxiety and tension and feelings of discomfort. And those feelings will come in AA or out, a little slower in AA. And then when you start feeling bad, you know what you have to do then? You have to try AA. AA is not words, AA is not thoughts, it's not prayers, it is action. It is doing things, and you cannot trust your own head as to what the proper actions are. So you must, I think it's safe to say that all the people I've ever known, you must surrender your judgment, which is the hardest single surrender you will ever have to make in your life. I'd rather surrender almost anything else. Certainly no one else can know what's better for me than I do, and yet I must come to act on that basis. And that's why this book says action is the magic word. Not love, not spirituality, not prayer, action. And it's hard for people like me to accept, and I'm sure like some of you, because, for example, my psychiatrist would say, Clancy, come to me. We will change your thinking, and eventually your life and your actions will get better. That sounds reasonable. These well-meaning AAs, nice people, but can't even get that right. You'll come to us and we'll change your actions, and somehow your life and thinking will get better. I don't think so. But if you stay here long enough, kid, you'll see something funny. These amateurs got about 2 million sober alcoholics, and the doctors have 0. There's a moral there somewhere, I just don't know what it is. The moral is stay here and do it, and take the actions and get a sponsor. The only thing is, I want to say, kind of in closing, that if you do it too long sometimes, however, you overdo. Now, I've had a lot of good things in AA. The last couple of years, I've been active a lot, all these years. So I was just talking to someone at the break. In the last year and a quarter or so, I've been asked to come and speak in exotic places like Cape Town and Johannesburg and Berlin and Oslo and London and Dublin, and last summer touring Australia and New Zealand. You'd think you'd find exotic AA in all these places, but you really don't, except for the accents. You hear the same emotions you'll hear before this meeting and after it. Some people who have come here and taken actions that don't seem to make sense, and they're feeling better. Some people who refuse, cannot or will not take the actions, and who sneer at the people who have, and newcomers in the middle, and both groups fight for their souls. It's the same way all over the world. But the whole point is this: if you do it too long, I was doing quite well when I was 15 years sober, and I was a marketing director of a publishing firm in Beverly Hills, and I was doing fine. Then, in some hideous transformation, I found myself leaving that job, and for the last 26 years, I run the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people say, why would you give up this great career to run that damn midnight mission? And I've never been able to think of a good answer. Well, for such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. I mean, it's not a treatment center, like we're way below that. We're just trying to keep people alive. But it's a funny thing I've noticed over the years. When I leave there at night, I always tend to have a little better feeling that my staff and I maybe have done a little more good than I ever did come down those elevators. Beverly Hills pop at my fingers and say, hey, baby. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, either you, young lady, or any of the other new people here tonight, I don't want to mislead you. Even if you go to AA and get involved and find a sponsor that you can respect enough to allow him or her to superimpose actions over your perceptions and do the things that Vinny talked about and all the people who've talked about tonight. Even if you do all these things, we can't guarantee you that in 15 years you can have your own mission. You know, there's only so many to go around. I got mine, and that's for you. But I think we can guarantee you that you may find yourself walking with some degree of dignity and self-worth, not always, mostly, and lack of fear, mostly, and feeling like you fit in, and you have tools to fit in if you choose to do that. And you can find yourself to be of value to others that you never thought possible. People have no way to go. You may even come to believe in a God that loves you. It took me a long time to come to that belief, but I'm sure glad I got it now. That's what you do this for, to enable yourself to walk straight. And it's not spooky, it's not mystic. You just got to do it. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.